The key turned in the lock of what used to be my childhood home in suburban Cleveland. After 12 years, I was finally back. Not as the disgraced son who was thrown out at 18, but as the new owner. The irony wasn't lost on me as I walked through the same front door where my father had screamed that I'd never amount to anything, where he told me I was dead to him, where my mother had stood silently as he threw my belongings onto the porch. That night in 2012 changed everything. I left with nothing but a duffel bag and $43 in my pocket. My father's final words still echo in my mind. Don't you dare come crawling back when you fail. This family doesn't need deadweight like you. He was convinced I'd be back within a month, broke and begging for forgiveness. He was wrong. What my family didn't know, what none of them suspected as they celebrated my exile, was that I had something they never gave me credit for. Something that would eventually turn their smugness into shock, their certainty into devastation. A secret that would flip our entire family dynamic upside down and make me the one holding all the power. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how the family that once threw me out like garbage ended up losing everything to me, you need to know about the Kowalskis, about Polish-American pride, about fathers who mistake cruelty for strength, and about a son who learned to play a very long game. The house keys felt heavier than they should have as I stood in that empty hallway, surrounded by the ghosts of a family that thought they'd seen the last of me. They had no idea what was coming. The Kowalski family embodied everything about blue-collar Polish-American values in Cleveland's Parma neighborhood. My father, Stan, worked 32 years at the Ford stamping plant before they moved operations to Mexico. He was the kind of man who measured worth in overtime hours and considered showing emotion a sign of weakness. Sunday dinners were mandatory, featuring my grandmother's pierogi recipe and my father's lectures about earning your place at this table. My mother, Carol, had given up her teaching dreams to raise 4 kids. She navigated my father's moods like a seasoned sailor reads storms, always adjusting, always accommodating, never challenging. My older brother Mike followed Dad into factory work and was already married with kids by 22. My sister Jenny married her high school boyfriend right after graduation. Then there was Tommy, the baby, who could do no wrong in my father's eyes. And then there was me, David, the middle child who asked too many questions and wanted different things. I was 8 when I first felt the sting of public humiliation at our family's hands. During my first communion party in our backyard, surrounded by relatives and neighbors, my father decided to share a story about how I'd cried when our dog died the week before. "Look at little Davy," he announced, beer in hand, voice carrying across the yard. "Still crying like a baby over that mutt. Real men don't cry over animals." The laughter that followed felt like acid. Even now, I remember my Uncle Joe slapping my father's back, saying, "Better toughen him up early, Stan." The pattern continued through high school. When I made honor roll junior year, instead of pride, I got skepticism. At our extended family's Easter gathering at the Polish-American Cultural Center, my father announced to everyone that I was getting too big for my britches with all this book learning. He wondered aloud if I thought I was better than the family that raised me. The room went silent except for my cousins, snickering. I spent the rest of the evening helping my aunt in the kitchen, trying to disappear. But it was my father's grand gesture that sealed my fate. For my 18th birthday, instead of the car I'd been working toward with my part-time job at the grocery store, he announced he was using that money, my college fund that my grandmother had left me, to help Mike buy a house. "College is just going to fill your head with liberal garbage anyway," he declared at the birthday dinner. "Mike needs this money for something real, something useful." What nobody knew was that my grandmother hadn't just left me a college fund. There was something else, something much bigger that she'd told only me about during those final months in the hospital. A secret that would change everything, but one I couldn't access until I turned 25. My babcia had made me promise to keep it between us, and even as I watched my father steal my college dreams, I held onto that secret like a lifeline. Where in the world are you watching this from? Drop a comment and let me know. I love hearing from viewers around the globe. The real breaking point came 6 months later. I'd been accepted to Cleveland State University and was planning to pay my own way through student loans and my grocery store job. But my father saw this as the ultimate betrayal, the final proof that his middle son thought he was too good for the Kowalski way of life. The explosion happened during Tommy's high school graduation party in June 2012. My father had gone all out, rented tables, hired a DJ, invited half the neighborhood. The backyard was decorated with blue and gold streamers, and there was enough Polish sausage and beer to feed a small army. This was Stan Kowalski showing everyone that his youngest son was the pride of the family, the one who got it right. I should have seen it coming when my father started drinking early, nursing his third Budweiser before noon. He was in his element, playing the proud patriarch, telling anyone who'd listen about Tommy's scholarship to trade school. Now this, he'd announce, gesturing toward Tommy, this is how you do it right. Learn a skill, make good money, stay close to family. Not like some people who think they're too good for honest work. The digs started small. When Mrs. Nowak from next door asked about my college plans, my father jumped in before I could answer. Davy's got some fancy ideas about university, he said, the word university dripping with mockery. Thinks he needs a piece of paper to tell him he's smart. The crowd chuckled uncomfortably. As the afternoon wore on, the comments got sharper. When I helped my mother carry plates to the kitchen, my father announced loud enough for everyone to hear, "Look at that, folks. Davy's practicing for his future career, washing dishes and waiting tables. That's what happens when you chase dreams instead of reality." My Uncle Joe, emboldened by beer and my father's performance, decided to pile on. "Remember when this one wanted to be a doctor?" He laughed, pointing at me. "A Kowalski kid thinking he could play with the rich kids. Your dad tried to save you from that embarrassment, Davy. You should be thanking him." I felt my face burning as neighbors and relatives laughed. My mother shot me a look that said, "Just endure it," the same look she'd perfected over decades of marriage. Tommy, uncomfortable with being used as ammunition against me, tried to change the subject, but my father wasn't done. The breaking point came when my high school girlfriend Sarah arrived with her parents. Sarah had been accepted to Ohio State for pre-med, and her father was a successful accountant. Stan saw an opportunity for maximum humiliation. "Hey, Sarah," my father called out, beer sloshing as he waved her over. "Come tell everyone about your big college plans. Show my son here what real ambition looks like." He turned to her parents with exaggerated pride. "Your daughter's going to be a doctor. Not like some kids who think they can just drift through life without a real plan." Sarah's father looked confused, glancing between my father and me. "Actually, David got into Cleveland State too. We're really proud of both kids for Cleveland State." My father cut him off with a bark of laughter. "Yeah, that's our Davy. Always shooting for the stars." The sarcasm was so thick you could cut it with a knife. "Tell him what you told me about paying for it, son. Go ahead, share your brilliant financial plan." This was my father's favorite game, forcing me to admit my vulnerabilities in front of an audience. I could feel 40 pairs of eyes on me as heat crept up my neck. "I'm working it out," I said quietly. "Working it out." He slapped his knee dramatically. "He's going to work it out, folks. Take on massive debt for a degree that'll get him the same job he could get right now. Meanwhile, Tommy here gets a scholarship and will be making good money while Davy's still paying off student loans in 20 years. The crowd was shifting uncomfortably now. Even in our rough-around-the-edges neighborhood, publicly humiliating your own child at a family gathering was crossing a line. But my father was on a roll, fueled by beer and the attention. "You know what the real problem is?" he continued, his voice getting louder. "Some kids just can't accept reality. They think they're special, think they deserve more than what their family gave them. But life's got a way of teaching those lessons." That's when my phone rang. I glanced down and saw a number I didn't recognize, but something made me answer it anyway. Maybe it was desperation to escape the moment, or maybe it was fate. "Is this David Kowalski?" The voice was professional, formal. "Yes. This is James Crawford from Crawford, Phillips and Associates. I represent your late grandmother's estate. I need to discuss some urgent matters regarding your inheritance. Are you available to meet tomorrow?" I stepped away from the crowd, my heart pounding. What kind of matters? "I'd prefer to discuss this in person," But there's been a development regarding the property holdings your grandmother left you. You'll need to come to our office to sign some papers. Property holdings? My grandmother lived in a small apartment. What property holdings? If you could help us reach 1,000 subscribers, hitting that like button and subscribing really helps the channel grow. Thank you. When I returned to the party, my father was still holding court, but now he was focused on me with laser intensity. Let me guess, he announced to everyone, that was a bill collector already? Haven't even started college and already in debt. Something snapped inside me. Maybe it was the phone call, maybe it was years of accumulated rage, but I looked my father straight in the eye and said something I'd never dared before, you have no idea what's coming. The party went dead silent. My father's face shifted from amusement to something darker, more dangerous. In Polish-American families like ours, you don't challenge the patriarch in public. Ever. What I'd just done was tantamount to declaring war. What did you just say to me? His voice was low, controlled, but I could see the vein pulsing in his temple that always appeared before he exploded. The smart move would have been to back down, apologize, retreat to the safety of silence. But 12 years of humiliation, of being made to feel small and worthless in front of everyone who mattered, had reached a breaking point. The phone call had shifted something fundamental inside me. There was a world beyond this backyard, beyond my father's approval, beyond the suffocating expectations of being a good Kowalski boy. I said you have no idea what's coming, I repeated louder this time. You think you know everything about me, about what I'm capable of, but you don't know anything. My father set down his beer and took a step toward me. The crowd instinctively moved back, creating a circle around us like we were about to settle this with fists. My mother was making her worried humming sound, and Tommy looked like he wanted to disappear entirely. You little punk, my father said, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet yard. You think because you got into some community college that you can talk back to me? In my house? In front of my guests? Your house. The words came out before I could stop them. This house that's mortgaged to the hilt? This house you're about to lose because the plant closed and you're too proud to take a job you think is beneath you. I shouldn't have known about the mortgage troubles, but I'd overheard enough late-night arguments between my parents to piece it together. The look of shock on my father's face confirmed I'd hit the mark. How dare you? He started, but I was done being interrupted. How dare I what? Tell the truth? You want to know about reality, Dad? Here's reality. In 7 years, when I turn 25, I'm going to inherit everything Babsha left me. Not just the college fund you stole for Mike. Everything. The confusion on my family's faces was almost comical. My grandmother had been careful, had made sure only I knew about the real inheritance. But keeping that secret had cost me 12 years of being treated like the family failure. Babsha didn't just leave me money for school, I continued, my voice steady now, fueled by years of suppressed rage. She left me her properties. All of them. The apartment building on Brook Park Road that you think she sold. The rental houses on the west side. The commercial property downtown. She never sold them. She put them all in a trust for me. My Uncle Joe laughed nervously. What properties? Ma lived in that little apartment until she died. That little apartment she paid cash for, I said, so she could live simply while she built a real estate portfolio worth over $2 million. She was buying rundown properties and fixing them up for 30 years. Every time she said she was visiting friends, she was checking on her investments. The silence was deafening. My mother's face had gone completely white. My father looked like someone had hit him with a baseball bat. That's impossible, my father said, but his voice lacked conviction. She would have told us. She told me, I said. She told me because she knew exactly how this family works. She knew you'd try to control it, use it, take it away from the person it was meant for. She made me promise not to tell anyone until I turned 25 and could claim it myself. I pulled out my phone and showed them the screen with the lawyer's number still displayed. That was her estate attorney. Apparently, there's been some development that means I can access part of my inheritance early. Something about property values increasing enough to trigger an early release clause. The yard was so quiet you could hear the neighbor's sprinkler system cycling through its rotation. 40 people stood frozen, watching the Kowalski family drama unfold like a soap opera. But here's the beautiful part, I continued, addressing my father directly. Remember how you always said I'd come crawling back when I failed? How I'd never amount to anything without this family? Well, Dad, you're half right. I will be back. But not as a failure begging for scraps. My father's face was turning red, the way it did before he started throwing things. You ungrateful little, I'll be back as your landlord. Those 5 words hit like a bomb. You could actually see people's minds trying to process what I just said. You see, I've been doing some research on this neighborhood, on property values, on who owns what. And I know exactly how much you owe on this house, Dad. I know you're 3 months behind on payments. I know the bank's getting ready to foreclose. My mother made a small, wounded sound. My father's hands were clenched into fists. So here's what's going to happen, I said, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. I'm going to leave now. I'm going to walk away from this family that's done nothing but make me feel small and worthless my entire life. And when the bank forecloses on this house, I'm going to buy it. Cash. I started walking toward the house to get my jacket, but I turned back for one final shot. And then, Dad, we'll see who comes crawling back to whom. The explosion of voices started before I even reached the back door. My father was shouting, my mother was crying, relatives were talking over each other trying to make sense of what had just happened. But I didn't look back. I walked through the house one last time, grabbing my keys and wallet, and headed for the front door. As I reached for the handle, I could hear my father's voice carrying from the backyard, telling everyone this was just another one of my fantasies, that I was delusional, that there was no inheritance. But as I stepped onto the front porch for what I thought would be the last time, I smiled. He had no idea how wrong he was. The 24 hours after that party were chaos. My phone exploded with calls and texts, some from relatives demanding to know if what I'd said was true, others from family friends expressing shock at how I'd disrespected my father. Mike left a voicemail calling me a selfish piece of shit who just destroyed the family. Jenny texted that I was dead to her for humiliating Dad in front of the whole neighborhood. But the most telling response was silence from my parents. Nothing. Not a single word. I met with James Crawford the next morning at his downtown law office. The mahogany-paneled conference room felt like stepping into a different universe from the aluminum-sided houses and chain-link fences of Parma. Crawford was exactly what you'd expect from a high-end estate attorney, expensive suit, silver hair, the kind of confidence that comes from handling serious money. Your grandmother was quite remarkable, he said, spreading documents across the polished table. She started with a single duplex in 1982 and built an impressive portfolio. 23 properties total, apartment buildings, single-family rentals, and that commercial space downtown that houses 3 businesses. The numbers were staggering. Current value, $3.2 million, generating roughly $35,000 per month in rental income. The early release clause had been triggered because property values in Cleveland's gentrifying neighborhoods had increased by more than 40% since the trust was established. She was very specific about keeping this confidential, Crawford continued. She said your family wouldn't understand, that they'd see it as money to be spent rather than wealth to be preserved. She wanted you to have time to mature, to understand the responsibility that comes with this kind of inheritance. My grandmother had been preparing me without me even realizing it. All those afternoons she'd spent teaching me about budgeting, about the difference between assets and liabilities, about how rich people think different than poor people. I thought she was just sharing general wisdom. She was giving me graduate-level financial education. The best part? She'd been quietly buying properties in neighborhoods that were just starting to turn around. The apartment building on Brook Park was now in an area young professionals were calling trendy. The commercial property downtown was in the path of Cleveland's urban renewal project. My grandmother hadn't just been a landlord, she'd been a visionary investor. But the inheritance came with conditions. I couldn't just cash out and disappear to Florida. I had to maintain the properties for at least 5 years, continue her business model, and most importantly, I had to use this gift to build something meaningful, not just to prove points to small-minded people. That last condition gave me pause. Was buying my family's house just about proving a point? Over the next 3 months, I threw myself into learning the real estate business. I worked with property managers, studied market trends, and started understanding why my grandmother had been so successful. She hadn't just bought properties, she'd improved neighborhoods. Her buildings were well maintained, her tenants were screened carefully, and she charged fair rents that attracted stable, long-term residents. The family drama, meanwhile, reached epic proportions. My Aunt Sophie called crying, begging me to share the inheritance with my siblings, like Babsha would have wanted. My Uncle Joe showed up at my apartment drunk, demanding to know if I was really going to let the family lose their house over some petty grudge. The pressure campaign was intense and coordinated. Suddenly, I was getting visits from family friends, former teachers, even our old parish priest, all trying to convince me that family is everything and that I should do the right thing. The irony was thick. The same people who'd laughed at my father's jokes about me for years were now lecturing me about family loyalty. But the most devastating conversation came from my mother. She finally called 3 weeks after the party, her voice small and broken. "Davy, is it true? About the money?" "Yes, Ma. It's true." A long silence. Then, she never told me. 30 years I took care of her, and she never told me. She told me not to tell anyone. She made me promise. "But you could have told me," she whispered. "I'm your mother. After everything your father said to you, after he took your college fund, you could have told me the truth." That phone call haunted me for weeks. My mother was right. I could have told her. Could have spared her years of worry about my future, could have prevented my father from using my supposed failure as ammunition in their marriage. But I'd honored my grandmother's wishes, and in doing so, I'd let my own mother suffer. The unexpected twist came in November, 6 months after the party. I was reviewing the property portfolio when Crawford called with surprising news. My grandmother had left one more provision in her will, a sealed letter to be opened if I accessed the inheritance early. The letter, written in her careful handwriting, revealed something that changed everything. "My dear Davy, if you're reading this, it means the family treated you so badly that you felt the need to reveal our secret early. I'm sorry for that, but not surprised. Your father is his father's son, and some men mistake hardness for strength, cruelty for love. But here's something you don't know. I've been quietly helping your parents for years. The payments they thought came from your father's union benefits? That was me, protecting them without their knowledge. The reason they haven't lost the house yet isn't because of their good credit, it's because I've been making their mortgage payments. That will stop now. Not because I don't love them, but because enabling Stan's pride isn't helping anyone. He needs to learn that family isn't about who's in charge, it's about who shows up when it matters. Use your inheritance wisely, my dear boy. And remember, the best revenge is a life well lived, not a point well made." The letter included bank records showing payments totaling over $180,000 over the past 5 years. My grandmother had been single-handedly keeping my family afloat while they remained oblivious to their actual financial situation. 3 weeks later, the foreclosure notice was posted on my childhood home. I drove by the house that December evening, seeing the yellow notice taped to the front door. The Christmas decorations my mother always hung with such pride were noticeably absent. The house looked smaller somehow, shabbier, like a person who'd lost too much weight too fast. My phone had been silent for weeks. No more pressure calls, no more guilt trips. The family had finally understood that I wasn't coming to their rescue, at least not on their terms. But as I sat in my car looking at that house, I realized my grandmother had been right about revenge versus justice. Buying the house to become my father's landlord would just perpetuate the cycle of humiliation and power games that had poisoned our family for generations. It would make me just like him, using money and control to make people feel small. That night, I made a different choice. Instead of buying my childhood home, I purchased a different property in the same neighborhood, a rundown duplex that I could renovate and turn into affordable housing for families like the one I'd grown up in. Families where the father worked hard but struggled to make ends meet, where the children deserved stability even if their parents made mistakes. The house my family lost went to another buyer. They moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. My father found work as a security guard, swallowing his pride out of necessity. My mother went back to substitute teaching. And me? I became exactly what my grandmother had trained me to be, not a landlord seeking revenge, but a business owner building something meaningful. Someone who understood that true power isn't about making others feel small, but about making yourself strong enough that their opinions no longer matter. 5 years later, I own 37 properties across Cleveland and have helped dozens of families find stable, affordable housing. I employ 6 people, including 2 property managers who grew up in neighborhoods just like mine. The business my grandmother started with a single duplex now generates enough income to support multiple families while building wealth that will last generations. The relationship with my own family remains complicated. My mother and I talk occasionally, careful conversations that avoid the past and focus on safe topics like the weather and her substitute teaching stories. She never apologized for the years of silence, and I never demanded one. Some wounds heal around the edges rather than completely closing. Tommy reached out 2 years ago when he got engaged. He wanted me to know about the wedding but understood if I couldn't come. I sent a gift and a note wishing him happiness. Small steps, but steps nonetheless. Mike and Jenny haven't spoken to me since that day. My father hasn't either. I've heard through extended family that he still tells anyone who'll listen that I'm an ungrateful son who abandoned his family over money. The irony that he abandoned me first isn't lost on me, but I've stopped needing him to see it. The hardest lesson I learned wasn't about real estate or family dynamics. It was about forgiveness. Not the kind of forgiveness that pretends nothing happened, but the kind that frees you from carrying other people's choices like stones in your pockets. My father's cruelty was his choice. My family's silence was their choice. My grandmother's generosity was her choice. And my response, that was mine to control. Sometimes I drive through my old neighborhood and see the house where I grew up. New owners painted it yellow and added a small garden where my mother used to grow tomatoes. It looks happy, peaceful. I'm glad it ended up with a family who'll make better memories there than we ever did. The business continues to grow, but more importantly, it has purpose. Last month, I helped a single mother and her 2 kids move into one of my renovated apartments after their previous landlord tried to evict them for complaining about unsafe conditions. Watching her 8-year-old son discover he finally had his own bedroom reminded me why my grandmother built this legacy, not for revenge or pride, but for the simple radical act of giving people stable places to call home. If you're watching this because you're dealing with family drama, toxic relatives, or feeling like you're not living up to someone else's expectations, I want you to know something. Their limitations don't define your possibilities. The people who are supposed to love and support you unconditionally might be the ones holding you back the most. And sometimes, the greatest act of love, for them and for yourself, is walking away and building something better. Success isn't just about proving people wrong. It's about building a life so fulfilling that their opinions become irrelevant. It's about using whatever gifts you have, whether that's an inheritance, a talent, or just pure stubborn determination, to create value in the world rather than just settling scores. My grandmother left me more than money. She left me the understanding that wealth isn't about what you can buy, but what you can build. Family isn't just the people you're born to, but the people who show up for you when it matters. And home isn't a place you inherit, it's something you create. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear about your own journey in the comments below. Have you had to choose between family loyalty and personal growth? How did you handle it? Your story might help someone else who's struggling with similar decisions. And if you found value in hearing this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We're building a community here of people who believe that your past doesn't have to determine your future, and every subscription helps us reach more people who need to hear that message. Thanks for listening, and remember, sometimes the best way to honor where you came from is to become someone your younger self would be proud of, regardless of whether anyone else understands the journey.